I was floating on my back in my pool, eyes closed against the Arizona sun, when my phone started buzzing with enough urgency to tell me this was not going to be a peaceful Saturday in Phoenix. The water was perfect, 82 degrees, and I had just mixed myself a margarita that was sitting on the edge, condensation dripping down the glass. Life was good, or at least it had been for the last 15 minutes. "Dave, you need to get out here right now," my neighbor Tom called over the fence. His voice had that edge to it that meant trouble was brewing, the kind of trouble that always seemed to find me ever since we moved into this God-forsaken Sunset Ridge HOA community 6 months ago. I swam to the edge and pulled myself out, water streaming off my board shorts. "What's going on?" "Patricia's at your front door with someone, looks official." "Patricia Henderson." Of course it was Patricia Henderson. The woman had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable since the day I moved in. She was the HOA president, a 52-year-old woman with that particular haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," and an attitude that could curdle milk at 50 paces. Her highlights were always fresh, her nails always done, and her sense of entitlement always cranked up to 11. I grabbed my towel and headed through the house, leaving wet footprints on the tile. Through the frosted glass of my front door, I could see 2 silhouettes. One was definitely Patricia, her rigid posture unmistakable. The other was taller, broader. My stomach dropped. I opened the door to find Patricia standing there with her arms crossed and a smug smile plastered across her face. Next to her stood my husband, Marcus, in his police uniform. His face was carefully neutral, but I could see the apology in his eyes. "Dave," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I've brought Officer Chen to discuss a very serious matter regarding your violation of HOA Code Section 12.7. Are you kidding me right now?" I looked at Marcus, who shifted his weight uncomfortably. "You sent my own husband to my house on official police business for an HOA complaint," Patricia's smile widened. "I simply contacted the Phoenix Police Department about a code violation that's affecting the entire community. It's not my fault that Officer Chen happens to be your spouse. The law is the law, Dave." Marcus cleared his throat. "Dave, can we talk inside? This is ridiculous, but she's technically filed a formal complaint and I have to follow protocol." I stepped back and let them in, my blood pressure rising with each second. We'd been married for 3 years, together for 5, and Patricia knew exactly what she was doing. She'd been looking for a way to weaponize my husband's job against me since she found out he was a cop. "So what's this about?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Patricia pulled out a folder because of course she had a folder. Section 12.7 of the Sunset Ridge HOA Covenant states that any amenity that could reasonably be considered a community enhancement must be made available to all residents for a minimum of 20 hours per week. Your pool, Dave, is clearly visible from the street and from multiple neighboring properties. It's been determined that this constitutes a community amenity and therefore must be shared. I stared at her. "You want me to open my private pool in my private backyard to the entire neighborhood?" "Not the entire neighborhood, just the residents of Sunset Ridge. That's only 47 homes, very reasonable." "That's not reasonable at all. This is my property. I paid for this pool with my own money. It's not part of any community facility." Marcus held up his hand. "Patricia, I've already told you this isn't a police matter. The HOA bylaws don't supersede private property rights." "But Section 12.7 clearly states—" "I don't care what it states," I interrupted. "You can't force me to let strangers swim in my pool. That's insane." Patricia's expression hardened. "Then I'll have no choice but to fine you $500 per day until you comply. Starting today, you can't do that." "I absolutely can. It's all here in the covenant you signed when you purchased the property." She thrust a packet of papers at me. "You should have read the fine print, Dave." After she left, taking Marcus with her since he was technically on duty, I sat on my couch and read through the entire HOA covenant. It was 67 pages of the most absurd, overreaching nonsense I'd ever seen. Section 12.7 did exist, but it was vaguely worded and clearly meant to apply to things like tennis courts or clubhouses, not private pools in private backyards. Marcus came home that evening still in uniform, looking exhausted. "I'm so sorry about today." She ambushed me at the station, filing a formal complaint. My sergeant made me go check it out since it was technically in my jurisdiction. "Did you tell her it was crazy?" Of course I did. I told her multiple times that this isn't enforceable and that she's wasting everyone's time. But she's threatening to escalate it, and she's got the HOA board backing her up. I leaned back against the kitchen counter. "I can't believe we moved here. The house was perfect, the neighborhood seemed nice, and then we discovered Patricia. She's got nothing better to do than harass people. Remember the Johnsons? She fined them $1,500 because their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. And the Martins got hit with $2,000 in fines because they planted roses instead of petunias in their front beds." Marcus pulled me into a hug. "We'll fight this. She can't actually make you share your pool." But fighting it turned out to be harder than either of us anticipated. Monday morning, I woke up to find a certified letter taped to my front door. Inside was a formal notice of violation and a fine schedule, $500 per day, due immediately with compounding interest after 30 days. They'd also placed a lien on my property pending compliance. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was Robert Millstone, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Phoenix, a sleek high-rise with a view of the mountains. "Mr. Chen," Robert said, leaning back in his leather chair, "I've dealt with Sunset Ridge HOA before. Patricia Henderson is notorious in the legal community. So you can help me. I can try. The problem is that Arizona has very strong HOA laws. If the covenant says something, even something absurd, it's generally enforceable unless we can prove it violates state or federal law. How does forcing me to share my private pool not violate property rights?" Robert pulled up the covenant on his computer. Section 12.7 is problematic. It's vague enough that Patricia can argue it applies to your pool, but specific enough that a judge might uphold it. The key word here is visible. She's arguing that because your pool is visible from public areas, it's a community amenity. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I agree. But I've seen judges rule in favor of HOAs on flimsier grounds. Arizona courts tend to defer to the covenant as a binding contract between you and the HOA. So what do? We file a motion to have the covenant provision declared unenforceable. We argue that it's overly broad and violates your property rights. But I have to warn you, this could take months and cost you tens of thousands in legal fees. And there's no guarantee we'll win. I left his office feeling worse than when I'd arrived. That evening, I found another notice on my door. Patricia had added additional fines for willful noncompliance and obstruction of community welfare. I was now up to $1,500 in daily fines. Marcus was livid when he saw the notices. "This is harassment, pure and simple. What can we do? The lawyer says we might not even win." Then we play her game, we document everything. Every interaction, every fine, every ridiculous demand, and we find other homeowners she's targeted. There's no way we're the only ones. He was right. Over the next week, I reached out to everyone in the neighborhood who'd had run-ins with Patricia. The stories were incredible. She'd fined the Gonzalez family for having their garage door open for more than 30 minutes. She'd threatened the Patels with foreclosure because they'd painted their shutters cream instead of eggshell. She'd forced the Williamson family to remove a vegetable garden because it wasn't aesthetically consistent with community standards. We organized a meeting at the community center on a Thursday evening. 32 people showed up, all with horror stories about Patricia's reign of terror. She fined us $4,000 because we installed solar panels, said Michelle Rodriguez, a teacher who lived 3 streets over. She said they weren't pre-approved, even though we'd submitted the paperwork months in advance. She tried to force us to remove our daughter's playset, added Kevin Brooks, bouncing a toddler on his knee. Said it was visible from the street and violated the aesthetics clause. She's fining Dave $500 a day because she wants access to his private pool, Marcus said, standing up to address the group. She's abusing her position and using the HOA as a weapon. An elderly woman named Dorothy raised her hand. Can't we vote her out? There must be some process. There is, said James Patel, who'd brought copies of the HOA bylaws. We need 40% of homeowners to sign a petition calling for a special election. Then we need a simple majority to remove her and elect a new board. Let's do it, I said. Let's get her out. The campaign started that night. We divided up the neighborhood and started knocking on doors. Most people were sympathetic, but many were afraid. Patricia had cultivated a network of supporters, mostly retired busybodies who enjoyed the power trip of enforcing arbitrary rules. They reported back to her about everything happening in the neighborhood. By Tuesday, we had enough signatures for the petition. We filed it with the HOA according to the bylaws, which required Patricia to schedule a special election within 30 days. She did not take it well. Wednesday afternoon, Marcus got called into his sergeant's office. Someone had filed a formal complaint against him, claiming he was using his position as a police officer to intimidate and harass HOA board members. The complaint was anonymous, but we both knew who'd filed it. They're investigating me now, Marcus said that night, pacing the kitchen. Internal Affairs wants to interview me tomorrow. If this goes badly, I could lose my job. That's insane. You haven't done anything wrong. Patricia's claiming I've made threatening statements and used my authority inappropriately. She's got 3 board members backing her up. They're lying. I know that, but it's my word against theirs and they're not the ones under investigation. I wanted to punch a wall. Instead, I called Robert Millstone. She's going after my husband's job now. What can we do? Document everything. Get statements from everyone at that community meeting. Show that this is retaliation for organizing against her. And Dave, be very careful. Patricia Henderson doesn't play fair. He wasn't kidding. Friday morning, I woke up to find my pool covered in garbage. Someone had dumped 3 bags of trash into it overnight. The water was full of food waste, plastic bottles, and what looked like motor oil. I called the police to file a report, and they sent Officer Amanda Torres, one of Marcus's colleagues. She took photos and collected what evidence she could, but without security cameras, there wasn't much to go on. This is vandalism and environmental contamination, Amanda said, making notes. Cleaning this up is going to cost you thousands. I know who did it. Do you have proof? No, but Patricia Henderson has been threatening me for weeks over this pool. Amanda's expression was sympathetic but professional. Without evidence, I can't make an arrest. But I'll file the report, and if anything else happens, we'll have a pattern documented. I spent the entire weekend cleaning the pool. The motor oil had contaminated the entire system. I had to drain it completely, scrub every surface, replace all the filters, and refill it. The pool company estimated the damage at $6,000. Monday brought more bad news. Patricia had filed a lawsuit against me in civil court, claiming I owed the HOA $35,000 in fines and fees. She was also seeking an injunction forcing me to open the pool to community use pending the resolution of the case. This is getting out of control, I told Robert during an emergency meeting. She vandalized my pool and now she's suing me. We can't prove she vandalized it, but we can fight the lawsuit. The problem is that she's escalating faster than I expected. She wants to bankrupt you into submission. Can she win? In Arizona, possibly. HOA law here is heavily weighted in favor of the association. But this injunction motion is absurd. No judge is going to force you to open your pool before the case is even heard. He was wrong. Judge William Preston granted a temporary injunction the following Friday. I had 30 days to make my pool available to HOA residents for a minimum of 20 hours per week or face contempt of court charges. How is this legal? I asked Robert outside the courtroom. Judge Preston is a property rights absolutist when it comes to HOAs. He believes covenants are sacred contracts and should be enforced to the letter. We'll appeal, but in the meantime, you have to comply or you'll be in contempt. I went home and told Marcus. He was furious. This is wrong. This is so fundamentally wrong. I don't have a choice. If I refuse, I could go to jail. Then we make sure nothing happens to anyone in that pool. We get liability insurance. We set up cameras. We document every single person who uses it, and we keep fighting. The pool opened to the community the following Monday. Patricia was the first one there, showing up at 9 in the morning with a smug expression and a designer swimsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "How thoughtful of you to finally comply, Dave," she said, settling into one of my lounge chairs. "The community will really appreciate this." I didn't respond. I'd set up 4 security cameras covering every angle of the pool and backyard. Everything was being recorded and backed up to cloud storage. If anything happened, I'd have proof. Over the next few days, dozens of people came and went. Most were polite and respectful, using the pool and cleaning up after themselves. But Patricia's crowd was different. They treated my backyard like their personal resort, leaving trash everywhere, playing loud music, and generally acting like they owned the place. On Thursday, Patricia showed up with 10 people and several coolers of alcohol. They proceeded to throw a party in my backyard without permission, getting progressively louder and more obnoxious as the afternoon wore on. I called the non-emergency police line. "I have a group of people trespassing and causing a disturbance in my backyard." The dispatcher was professional. "Officers are on their way, sir." 2 patrol cars showed up 20 minutes later. Neither one contained Marcus, who'd been carefully avoiding any calls related to our address to prevent accusations of bias. The officers cleared everyone out and issued citations for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. Patricia tried to argue that she had a right to be there because of the court order, but the officers explained that the order didn't permit parties or excessive noise. Patricia left, but not before getting in my face. "You'll regret this, Dave. I promise you that." Friday evening, Marcus came home early from his shift looking pale. Internal Affairs finished their investigation. My heart stopped. And? They're recommending a 30-day suspension without pay. They say I violated protocol by not recusing myself from neighborhood matters involving you. But you did recuse yourself. You've avoided everything related to our address. Patricia had her board members testify that I'd made threatening statements at the community meeting. They claim I said I'd use my position to intimidate them. That's a complete lie. We have 32 witnesses who can contradict that. I know. My union rep is fighting it, but in the meantime, I'm off the job for a month with no income. We sat on the couch together, both of us feeling the weight of Patricia's campaign crushing down on us. This had gone from annoying to life-destroying in a matter of weeks. Saturday morning, I woke up to chaos. Someone had broken into my backyard overnight and destroyed the pool pump, slashed all the lounge chair cushions, and spray-painted obscenities on my fence. The damage was extensive and clearly intentional. This time, the responding officers took it more seriously. Detective Sarah Kim from the Property Crimes Unit showed up personally. "This is your second vandalism incident in a month. You said you have cameras now." 4 of them, all recording constantly. "Let's see the footage." We pulled up the recordings on my laptop. At 2:30 in the morning, 3 figures in dark clothing and ski masks had climbed over my fence. They'd moved quickly and efficiently, destroying everything in sight before leaving the same way they'd come. "Can you identify any of them?" Detective Kim asked. "No, but I know who sent them." "Patricia Henderson." "Who else would it be?" Knowing and proving are different things. "But this is clearly coordinated harassment. I'm going to recommend enhanced patrols in your area and request forensic analysis of the scene. Maybe we'll get lucky with fingerprints or DNA." The special election was scheduled for the following Thursday. We'd been campaigning hard, going door to door, making phone calls and organizing information sessions about Patricia's abuses. The response was overwhelmingly positive, but we knew her core supporters would turn out in force. Election day arrived with temperatures hitting 112 degrees, typical for Phoenix in late June. The voting took place at the community center from 3 to 8 in the evening. Marcus and I arrived early to help set up, both of us nervous about the outcome. Patricia was there too, dressed in a crisp white pantsuit and working the room like a politician. She shook hands, made promises, and shot daggers at us with her eyes whenever she thought no one was looking. "She looks worried," Marcus whispered to me. "Good. She should be." The votes were counted at 8:30. James Patel, acting as an independent observer, tallied them up while everyone watched. The room was packed with at least 80 people, the biggest turnout for any HOA meeting in Sunset Ridge history. James cleared his throat. The results are as follows. For removal of Patricia Henderson as HOA president and dissolution of the current board, 49 votes. Against, 23 votes. Patricia Henderson has been removed from office effective immediately. The room erupted in applause. Patricia's face went bright red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "This is illegal. You can't do this." "It's completely legal," James said calmly. "The bylaws are very clear. The vote is final." I'll sue all of you. You're welcome to try," I said, standing up. "But you're done abusing your power." Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out, her supporters trailing behind her. The remaining crowd elected a new board on the spot. James Patel as president, Michelle Rodriguez as vice president, and Kevin Brooks as treasurer. Their first official act was to rescind all of Patricia's outstanding fines and repeal Section 12.7 as overly broad and unenforceable. I thought it was over. I really did. We'd won the election, removed Patricia, and fixed the HOA. Marcus's union rep was appealing his suspension with the new evidence of Patricia's coordinated harassment campaign. Things were looking up. Then Monday happened. I was having coffee in my kitchen when I heard sirens. Looking out the window, I saw police cars and fire trucks converging on Patricia's house, 3 streets over. Smoke was billowing from her garage. Marcus got a text from Amanda Torres. "You need to see this." We drove over to find Patricia's house cordoned off with police tape. Detective Kim was there, along with half a dozen other officers and fire investigators. Patricia herself was sitting in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket despite the heat. Amanda pulled us aside. They found evidence in her garage before the fire got too bad. Documents, photographs, planning materials. She was orchestrating everything, the vandalism, the harassment, all of it. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She hired people to trash your pool both times." We found receipts for payments, text messages coordinating the attacks, and photos she'd taken to document the damage. She was building a case to prove you weren't maintaining the pool properly as a community amenity. Detective Kim joined us. We're also finding evidence of financial fraud. She's been embezzling from the HOA for years, funneling money into personal accounts. The pool campaign against you was partly revenge for you looking too closely at HOA finances. "I never looked at the finances," I said. "No, but she thought you were going to after you organized that community meeting. She panicked and tried to destroy you before you could expose her." "How much did she steal?" "Preliminary estimate is over $200,000 over 5 years. She was using HOA funds for personal expenses, fake vendors, inflated maintenance contracts. It's a mess." Patricia was arrested that afternoon and charged with fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and harassment. The fire at her house had been ruled arson, likely an attempt to destroy evidence before investigators could obtain a warrant. That added another charge. The local news picked up the story that evening. HOA president arrested in embezzlement and harassment scheme ran on every channel. Patricia's mugshot, with her perfect highlights and furious expression, became a viral meme. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of depositions, interviews, and legal proceedings. The new HOA board hired forensic accountants to trace all of Patricia's financial crimes. The FBI got involved when they discovered she'd also been filing fraudulent insurance claims and engaging in mail fraud. Marcus's suspension was immediately overturned with a formal apology from the police department. Internal Affairs determined that Patricia had coordinated a false complaint campaign against him, using her board members to make up stories about threatening behavior. The officers who'd initially recommended suspension faced their own disciplinary action for not properly investigating the claims. My pool lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. Judge Preston, after reviewing all the evidence of Patricia's fraud and harassment, issued a scathing ruling condemning her abuse of the HOA system and her manipulation of the courts. He also issued a formal apology to me and ordered Patricia to pay all my legal fees and damages. Robert Millstone called me with the news. "You're getting a check for $78,000. That covers all your legal fees, the pool damage, the cleaning costs, and punitive damages for emotional distress." Will she actually pay it? Oh, she'll pay. The court's already started seizing her assets. Her house is going into foreclosure, her bank accounts are frozen, and she's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Patricia's trial began in September. I attended every day of it, watching as prosecutor after prosecutor laid out the evidence of her crimes. She'd stolen over $240,000 from the HOA. She'd hired people to vandalize properties of homeowners who opposed her. She'd falsified documents and lied to courts. She'd orchestrated a campaign of harassment against multiple families, not just mine. The defense tried to paint her as a dedicated volunteer who'd made some mistakes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 23 counts. Judge Franklin Moore sentenced her to 18 years in federal prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to all victims. "Mrs. Henderson," he said from the bench, "you abused a position of trust to enrich yourself and terrorize your neighbors. You weaponized institutions meant to serve the community for your personal vendetta. You've shown no remorse and no recognition of the harm you've caused. This sentence reflects the severity of your crimes and serves as a warning to others who might think they can abuse HOA authority with impunity." Patricia was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, still maintaining her innocence, still claiming everyone else was wrong. The Sunset Ridge HOA underwent a complete transformation after Patricia's arrest. James Patel and the new board eliminated dozens of ridiculous rules, reduced fines to reasonable levels, and implemented transparency measures to prevent future abuses. They brought in an independent management company to handle the finances and establish term limits for all board positions. The pool section of the covenant was completely rewritten to clearly state that private amenities on private property were not subject to community sharing requirements. Several other homeowners who'd been victimized by Patricia's fines received refunds and formal apologies. Marcus and I finally got to enjoy our pool in peace. On a Saturday afternoon in October, with the Arizona heat finally breaking and the temperature down to a pleasant 90 degrees, we floated together on inflatable chairs, cold drinks in hand. "Think we should have just moved when all this started?" Marcus asked. "Every single day for about 2 months, but I'm glad we stayed and fought." "Me too. Patricia was terrorizing this whole neighborhood. Who knows how long it would have gone on if we just rolled over." "Still can't believe she tried to use you being a cop against us. That was some next-level manipulation." She was smart, I'll give her that. Evil, but smart. She knew exactly how to weaponize the system. Tom poked his head over the fence. "Hey neighbors, pool looking good. Kind of ironic that you went through all that to keep it private and now you've got people asking to use it anyway." He was right. Several neighbors had politely asked if their kids could swim sometime, and we'd happily agreed. The difference was choice. It was our pool, our property, and our decision who used it, not Patricia's, not the HOA's, ours. You want to come over for a swim? I called to Tom, seriously. Yeah, grab your suit, bring your wife, we're grilling later. As Tom disappeared to change, Marcus smiled at me. So much for keeping it private. This is different. These are our friends, our choice. That's what all of this was really about, right? Having control over our own property and our own lives. That and making sure Patricia Henderson couldn't bully anyone else. That too. The sun set over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Our backyard filled with neighbors, not because a court order forced it or because some power-hungry HOA president demanded it, but because we invited them. Because that's what community is supposed to be. 6 months later, I ran into one of Patricia's former board members, a woman named Susan who'd testified against her at trial. She stopped me outside the grocery store, looking nervous. "Dave, I wanted to apologize," she said. "I went along with Patricia for so long. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I was afraid of her. She destroyed other people who'd opposed her, and I didn't want to be next. Why are you telling me this now? Because you stood up to her when the rest of us were too scared. You and Marcus risked everything to stop her. I should have helped you from the beginning, and I'm sorry I didn't." "It's okay, Susan. She had everyone intimidated. That was her whole strategy." "How's Marcus doing? I heard about the suspension." "He's good. Back at work, actually got a commendation for how he handled the whole situation." "Turns out standing up to corruption looks good on your record." "And the pool," I laughed. "Still there, still private, still ours, but we share it with friends now, on our terms." "That's how it should have been from the start." She was right. That's exactly how it should have been from the start. But sometimes, you have to fight for what should be obvious, especially when people like Patricia Henderson think rules and positions of authority give them the right to control other people's lives. The Sunset Ridge HOA published their annual report in December. Under James Patel's leadership, they'd recovered $190,000 of the money Patricia had stolen, with the remainder covered by insurance. Every homeowner who'd paid unfair fines received refunds. The community approved a completely rewritten set of covenants that focused on reasonable property maintenance standards, rather than arbitrary aesthetic controls. Most importantly, they established an ombudsman position, an independent party who homeowners could contact if they felt the HOA was overreaching. No more secret fines, no more targeting specific residents, no more Patricia Hendersons. Marcus and I celebrated our 4th wedding anniversary in January, sitting by the pool despite the 60-degree weather, wrapped in blankets and drinking champagne. "To surviving our first HOA nightmare," Marcus toasted. "To never having another one," I replied. "Think we'll stay here long term?" "I think so. The neighborhood's actually pretty great now that Patricia's gone. Good people, reasonable rules, nobody trying to force us to share our pool." Speaking of which, James asked if we'd be willing to host a community swim party this summer, voluntary, obviously. He wants to do neighborhood events that actually bring people together. What you tell him? That I'd ask you. It's your pool too. I thought about it. A year ago, the idea of dozens of neighbors in my pool would have sent me into a rage. But that was when Patricia was trying to force it, trying to take something that was mine and claim it for her own power trip. This was different. This was community, real community, not the fake forced version Patricia had tried to create through intimidation and lawsuits. "Tell him yes," I said. "But we control the guest list, and anyone who causes problems doesn't get invited back." Deal. The party happened in July, and it was exactly what a community event should be. 80 people came through over the course of the afternoon. Kids splashed in the shallow end while parents relaxed with drinks. Someone brought a portable speaker and played music. 3 different families brought food to share. Patricia Henderson's name came up exactly once, when someone made a joke about checking for hidden cameras before swimming. Everyone laughed, but it was the kind of laughter that comes from shared trauma survived together. We'd all been victims of her reign of terror, and we'd all benefited from her removal. As the sun set and the last guests left, thanking us profusely for hosting, I surveyed the damage. Some cups to pick up, a few wet towels scattered around, nothing major. Marcus started cleaning up while I drained a few inches of water from the pool to account for all the splashing. That was actually fun, I said. It was. Weird how it's completely different when it's your choice. That's what this whole thing was always about, choice. Control over our own property and our own lives. Patricia couldn't stand that anyone had something she didn't control. Think she's thought about that at all in prison? Probably not. People like her never think they're wrong. She's probably sitting in her cell right now convinced she's the victim. Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked it and laughed. Speaking of Patricia, remember her lawyer tried to appeal the sentence? Yeah, what happened with that? Denied. Appeals court upheld everything. She's serving the full 18 years. Good. We finished cleaning up as the Arizona sky turned that particular shade of deep purple that comes just before full darkness. The pool lights cast rippling patterns on the surrounding pavement. Somewhere in the distance, someone was having another party, music and laughter carrying on the warm evening air. This was what I'd wanted when we bought the house. Peace, privacy. The right to enjoy my own property without someone else trying to claim it. The irony that I now regularly shared that property voluntarily wasn't lost on me, but that was the whole point. It was my choice to share, not Patricia's to take. The following month, I got a letter from the Arizona Attorney General's office. They were investigating HOA abuses statewide and wanted to interview me about my experience with Patricia Henderson. Apparently, our case had sparked a broader look at HOA overreach and the need for stronger homeowner protections. I met with Assistant Attorney General Rachel Morrison in her Phoenix office. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and professional, with a stack of files that represented dozens of HOA horror stories similar to mine. Mr. Chen, your case has become something of a landmark in HOA law, she said. Patricia Henderson's abuse of authority was so egregious and so well documented that it's prompted legislative action. What kind of action? The state legislature is considering a bill that would limit HOA enforcement powers, require independent oversight for fines over a certain amount, and establish clearer procedures for removing abusive board members. Your testimony could help get that bill passed. Whatever I can do to help. I testified before a state legislative committee in September. The hearing room was packed with homeowners who'd been victimized by overzealous HOAs, along with HOA board members defending their authority. I told my story, the pool dispute, Patricia's escalating harassment, her attempt to weaponize my husband's job against me, the vandalism, the lawsuits, everything. The problem isn't HOAs in general, I concluded. The problem is when people like Patricia Henderson use HOA authority as a weapon to control and intimidate their neighbors. There need to be checks and balances, ways to stop abuses before they destroy lives. The bill passed in November with bipartisan support. The Arizona Homeowner Protection Act established strict limits on HOA fines, required independent mediation for disputes over a certain amount, made it easier to remove abusive board members, and created criminal penalties for HOA officials who engaged in fraud or harassment. Governor Rebecca Torres signed it in December, with several HOA abuse victims, including me, standing behind her for the ceremony. This law ensures that HOAs serve their intended purpose of maintaining property values and community standards without becoming vehicles for petty tyranny, the governor said. No one should have to go through what Dave Chen and his family endured. The law was nicknamed Patricia's Law in the media, though the official name was much more dignified. Patricia herself, sitting in federal prison, reportedly had no comment. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it gets after you've become the face of HOA reform in Arizona. Marcus and I settled into a comfortable routine. He got promoted to detective, partly because of his exemplary handling of the situation with Patricia. I started working from home more, enjoying the pool on my lunch breaks without worrying about unexpected visitors demanding access. The Sunset Ridge HOA continued to improve under James Patel's leadership. They organized legitimate community events, maintained common areas without harassing individual homeowners, and operated with complete financial transparency. It turned out an HOA could actually function the way it was supposed to when reasonable people were in charge. 2 years after Patricia's sentencing, I got a call from Robert Millstone. "Dave, I wanted to let you know that Patricia Henderson has filed for early release based on good behavior." My stomach dropped. Can she get it? Not a chance. She served less than 3 years of an 18-year sentence for serious federal crimes. The prosecutor's office is opposing it, and I've submitted a victim impact statement on your behalf, but I wanted you to know it was happening. The hearing took place in March. I attended via video conference, not wanting to see Patricia in person but wanting to make sure the judge heard from her victims. She'd lost weight in prison, and her perfect highlights had grown out to reveal gray roots. But her expression was the same, entitled, aggrieved, convinced the world had wronged her. Her lawyer made an impassioned plea about rehabilitation and remorse. Patricia herself gave a statement claiming she'd found God and wanted to make amends. Then the prosecutor played a recording from 2 weeks earlier. Patricia had been caught on prison surveillance trying to organize harassment of me and Marcus from inside federal prison. She'd been attempting to coordinate with remaining supporters to file nuisance lawsuits and complaints. So much for finding God and showing remorse. Judge Moore denied the motion immediately. "Mrs. Henderson, you've learned nothing. You continue to be a threat to the community and to your victims. Motion denied. Please don't waste this court's time again." Marcus and I celebrated that night with an expensive dinner and a long swim in our pool. Private, peaceful, and entirely under our control. "Think she'll ever give up?" Marcus asked. "Probably not. But she can't hurt us anymore. She's locked up, we're protected by law, and the HOA system has actual oversight now. Still can't believe all of this started because she wanted access to our pool. It wasn't really about the pool, it was about control. She couldn't stand that someone in her HOA kingdom had something she couldn't regulate. Well, she's got plenty of time to think about it now, 15 more years minimum. We floated under the stars, the Arizona sky clear and vast above us. Somewhere in the neighborhood, I could hear kids playing, someone grilling, the normal sounds of suburban life. No sirens, no confrontations, no Patricia Henderson making everyone miserable. The pool had cost me $70,000 to install, another $10,000 in legal fees and damages, and countless hours of stress and anxiety. But sitting there that night, peaceful and free, it felt worth every penny. Not because of the pool itself, but because of what fighting for it represented. The right to enjoy your own property, the courage to stand up to bullies, and the importance of community built on choice rather than coercion. A year later, James Patel decided not to run for re-election as HOA president. He'd served 3 years and felt it was time for new leadership. At the nomination meeting, several people suggested I should run. "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "Come on, Dave, you reformed the whole system." "You'd be perfect." "I reformed it so I wouldn't have to deal with it. I'm not becoming an HOA president. That's how Patricia started, remember? Reasonable person joins the board, gets drunk on power, becomes a monster. No thanks." They eventually elected Michelle Rodriguez, who continued James's policies of reasonable enforcement and community building. The HOA ran smoothly, collecting dues, maintaining common areas, and staying out of everyone's business. It was revolutionary in its normalcy. Marcus and I started talking about kids. The neighborhood was good now, the schools were decent, and our house had plenty of space. Patricia's reign of terror had nearly derailed our lives, but we'd come through it stronger. Think we'd be those parents who teach their kids to stand up to bullies. Marcus asked one evening, after what we went through, Absolutely, though hopefully they never have to deal with someone like Patricia. There's always someone like Patricia. Different setting, different issue, but there's always someone who thinks rules give them the right to control other people. Then we'll teach them to fight back the right way, legally, persistently, and with documentation. Very romantic. Hey, documentation saved our asses. Never underestimate the power of a well-organized file. We had our first child, a daughter named Maya, in April. The neighborhood threw us a baby shower, using our pool area for the party. It was voluntary, joyful, and everything Patricia's forced community had never been. As I watched Maya grow, learning to walk on the pool deck and eventually learning to swim in the shallow end, I thought about the world we'd fought to give her. A world where HOAs had oversight, where bullies faced consequences, and where standing up for your rights mattered. Patricia Henderson remained in federal prison, her appeals exhausted, her supporters scattered. The money she'd stolen had been recovered and returned. The families she'd terrorized had moved on. The neighborhood she'd tried to control had flourished without her. And my pool, the pool that had started everything, remained exactly what it was always meant to be. Mine to share or not share as I chose, a place of peace and privacy and occasional community, but always on my terms. Sometimes I'd see news stories about other HOA disputes, other Patricia Hendersons in different neighborhoods trying to control their neighbors through absurd interpretations of covenants. I'd usually send the victims information about Patricia's law and the contact information for Robert Millstone. A few times I'd testified in support of similar legislation in other states, but mostly I just enjoyed my life. My house, my family, my pool, my choice. That's what the whole nightmare had been about, and that's what we'd won. Marcus retired from the police force after 20 years and started teaching at the academy. Maya grew up and eventually went to Arizona State University, studying law with a focus on property rights. She said watching what her parents went through inspired her to help others facing similar situations. The Sunset Ridge HOA became a model for how these organizations should operate. Multiple news outlets did features on their transformation from Patricia's dictatorship to a functional, transparent community organization. James Patel wrote a book about HOA reform that became required reading for community management companies. And Patricia Henderson. She served her full sentence, was released in her late 60s, and moved to a rental apartment in Tucson. No HOA to deal with there. She tried to start a community organization in her apartment complex, but after her background came up in a simple Google search, nobody wanted anything to do with her. Justice, as it turned out, had been served after all. Not just in the courtroom, but in the complete dismantling of everything Patricia had built through intimidation and abuse. Her legacy wasn't fear and control, but reform and protection for homeowners across the state. My legacy was simpler: a nice house, a happy family, and a pool that I shared when I wanted to and kept private when I didn't, because that's what freedom actually looks like, not the absence of rules but the presence of choice. And every time I dove into that pool, feeling the cool water envelope me on a hot Arizona afternoon, I remembered why the fight had been worth it. Not for the pool itself, but for the principle. That my home was mine, my property was mine, and nobody, not even someone who claimed to be acting in the community's interest, had the right to take that away. Patricia had tried to use my husband's badge against me, tried to use the courts against me, tried to use mob intimidation against me. She'd failed on all counts because bullies, no matter how organized or official-looking, eventually run into people who refuse to be bullied. I was one of those people. Marcus was one of those people. And together we'd shown that standing up to tyranny, even the mundane neighborhood variety, was always worth the fight. The pool sparkled in the afternoon sun, private and peaceful, exactly as it should be. Exactly as it would remain. Because some battles, once won, stay won. And some lessons, once learned, become permanent truths about the importance of standing your ground when ground is worth standing for.